I was halfway through finishing a grant proposal in my Denver office when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen pop up in months. Ethan, my younger brother. That name alone made my stomach tighten. The kind of tight that doesn't come from fear, but from a mix of suspicion and exhaustion. We hadn't been close in years. Ethan was always impulsive, constantly chasing some business fantasy while I buried myself in environmental research and kept my head down. Still, something in me told me to pick up. "Hey, Ava," he said, way too cheerful. "Ethan? Yeah, so figured I should let you know. I sold the farmhouse. For a second, I thought I misheard. I blinked at my computer screen like it could confirm I was dreaming. You what? Grandpa's place," he said. "Got $3 million for it. My entire body froze. $3 million. The last time the place was appraised, it was worth $9 million. You sold Granddad's farmhouse for a third of what it's worth?" My voice was low, deadly calm. The calm right before the storm. "It was just sitting there, Ava," he snapped. "You're off saving the planet or whatever, and it was just rotting." I did what made sense. "You had no right." I clenched the edge of my desk. "Not without talking to me." He laughed. "I had every right. I was made executor, remember? I call the shots." "And the money?" Silence. Then he said it. "I spent it. On Mia's startup. She needed it more than you, Mia, his girlfriend of 8 months, who once asked me if bees were just spicy flies." I didn't say a word. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness, from rage. Within 15 minutes, I had booked a flight to Austin and cleared my entire week. I wasn't just angry. I was about to burn his little empire to the ground. The second I stepped off the plane and into the Texas humidity, the scent of old soil and memory hit me like a punch. Grandpa's farmhouse had always been more than land. It was where I learned to ride horses, where we buried our dog under the apple tree, where Grandpa Henry told stories that made the stars feel close enough to touch. And Ethan just sold it like a used pair of shoes on Facebook Marketplace. When I pulled up to the farm, it was as if time had collapsed. The porch was sagging. Weeds had conquered the garden. It looked less like a house and more like a ghost of our childhood. I stood there for a long time. Then I drove straight to Dallas. There was only one man who could help me now. Grandpa's lawyer. Mr. Charles Whitman. He was waiting when I arrived, looking just as composed as he did when we last met 6 years ago. "I assume this is about your brother's stunt," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "You heard. I got the transfer papers this morning." "And?" I leaned forward. "Is there anything we can do?" He smiled. "Not kindly. Strategically. Depends." "Did you ever read the amended deed?" "What amended deed?" Mr. Whitman slid a thick envelope toward me. 2 weeks before he passed, your grandfather updated the estate paperwork." I opened it. My eyes fell on 3 words, character contingency clause. "If one grandchild sells the property without the written approval of the other," Whitman recited, "ownership automatically transfers to the non-consenting party, irrevocably." The first stared at the paper. "Are you telling me? The sale is null. The farm belongs to you, Ava." I sat back, breath caught somewhere in my throat. Grandpa had planned for this. He knew Ethan. He knew exactly what could happen. And he set a trap. The next morning, Whitman scheduled a legal meeting with Ethan, his girlfriend Mia, and their brand new, overpriced attorney. They arrived late. Of course. Ethan walked in like he was about to negotiate a reality TV contract. Tan, smug, expensive watch practically blinding. Mia followed, texting mid-step, uninterested in anything that didn't involve ring lights or iced matcha. I didn't flinch. I'd been waiting for this. "You ready to get this over with?" He grinned. Whitman didn't even bother with small talk. He slid the amended deed across the table. "This document voids the sale." Ethan frowned, picked it up, read it. And for the first time since we were teenagers, I saw fear spread across his face. "This is fake," he said. But even he didn't believe it. "It's filed and notarized. Check the county records," Whitman said smoothly. "You're joking," Mia blurted. "Nope." I leaned in. "You gave away something that was never legally yours to sell." His lawyer turned pale. This changes everything." "I told you she'd pull something," Ethan hissed. "No, Ethan," I said calmly. "Grandpa pulled this. I just showed up for the encore." Mia's arms folded across her chest. "We already spent the money. That's your problem," I said. "And soon it'll be the IRS's." Ethan stood, shouting now. "You can't just take everything from me. I didn't blink. You gave it away. For nothing." Mr. Whitman tapped another folder. "Also, as executor, you breached fiduciary duty. Effective immediately, you're removed." Ethan stared at the paper like it was a prison sentence. "Because it might as well have been. But I don't have the money anymore," I stood. "Then I guess you'll have to figure that out, little brother." That night, I sat on the creaking porch swing, legs curled beneath me, the stars above as bright as I remembered. I'd won. Legally, morally, emotionally, but a knot still twisted in my stomach. Because Ethan didn't go down swinging. He went quiet. And my brother? He never goes quiet unless he's planning his next move. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed. "Ethan, we need to talk." And I knew this wasn't over. I stared at Ethan's message for a long time. "We need to talk." A part of me wanted to delete it and move on. I had every right to. I'd won. The farmhouse was legally mine. The sale was void, and Ethan had been stripped of his title as executor. But deep down, I knew my brother. He wasn't just licking his wounds. If Ethan was asking to talk, it meant he wasn't done. And if I ignored him, I might miss whatever it was he was still hiding. So I texted back, "Meet me at the farmhouse." 1 hour. It was almost midnight when he pulled into the driveway. The air smelled of damp soil, like it was about to rain. The porch light flickered weakly, casting uneven shadows across the gravel. Ethan stepped out of his SUV, looking nothing like the smug guy from earlier. His shoulders were slumped, his jaw tight, and for the first time in years, he looked unsure. No Mia this time, just him. Alone. He didn't speak right away, just shoved his hands in his jacket pockets and stared at the house like it was haunted. "You got what you wanted," he muttered. I leaned back against the porch rail, arms crossed. "Did I?" He scoffed, but there was no real fire behind it. "Come on, Ava. You have your research grants, your think tank life, your clean little apartment. You were never going to come back here. That doesn't mean you had the right to sell it behind my back." I shot back. "Grandpa's will didn't give you permission to burn down the legacy he spent a lifetime building." His eyes flicked toward me, sharper now. "You think I wanted to do this?" I didn't answer. I wanted him to say it, to stop hiding behind excuses and tell me why he really did it, because there had to be more. And then, he did. "I borrowed against the estate," he admitted quietly. "Not just the land. I touched the tax funds, the emergency savings, even the maintenance accounts. I thought I'd flip it all back before anyone noticed." The words sank like stones in my chest. "How much, Ethan?" He swallowed, looking away. $750. $750,000? My voice cracked. Jesus. He ran a hand through his hair, defeated. It was supposed to be a sure thing. Mia's connection had this development deal in Miami. Luxury condos, quick return. I put everything in. And then the company filed for bankruptcy last month. I closed my eyes, willing my pulse to slow. "You stole from Grandpa's estate to fund a failed real estate scam?" He didn't deny it. "I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. Before you showed up. But when the money disappeared, I panicked. That's why I sold the farm." "You didn't sell it," I corrected sharply. "You tried to sell it. And now you're in debt, broke, and legally exposed." Again. He dropped onto the porch steps, hands resting on his knees. Mia left the moment she realized there was nothing left. Packed a suitcase and disappeared. I sat beside him, the wooden steps creaking beneath us. For a while, neither of us spoke. I hated the mess he'd made, hated the betrayal. But watching him now, stripped of all his bravado, I also saw something else: fear. Not just of getting caught, but of being completely, utterly alone. The next morning, we drove to Charles Whitman's office in silence. I didn't know what I was hoping for. A miracle? Closure? Damage control? All I knew was that I couldn't carry the weight of this alone. Whitman looked up as we entered, unsurprised. "I figured you'd be back." Ethan sat down, palms sweating, and laid it all out. Every account he touched, every dollar redirected, every lie he told. When he finished, Whitman didn't scold him, didn't even look angry, just tired. "Your grandfather saw this coming," he said quietly. and he planned accordingly. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder labeled contingencies. Inside was a clause none of us had seen before, a financial safeguard against mismanagement. "This is an estate protection clause," he explained. "If triggered, an insurance policy activates to cover unauthorized investments up to $800. Oh. Ethan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. "So the money's covered?" Whitman raised a hand. "Not so fast. The insurance only pays out under one condition: you sign a formal admission of wrongdoing. That means taking full legal responsibility for every cent you mishandled." Ethan looked like someone had poured ice water down his spine. "And if I don't?" "Then Ava will be forced to file a formal lawsuit, which will initiate a forensic audit of every transaction you made as executor. And with what I've seen, there's a good chance you'll be charged with fraud." The word hung in the air like smoke. Fraud. Ethan's face turned pale. That could mean prison. I finished for him, yes. He sat motionless, staring at the document. Whitman continued, calm but firm. "In addition, if you sign, you'll agree to attend financial rehabilitation classes at your own cost, and you'll be permanently removed from any future involvement in the estate." Ethan looked over at me, almost pleading. "You're okay with this?" "No," I said honestly, "but it's the only thing standing between you and federal charges." For a few seconds, he didn't move. Then slowly, he picked up the pen and signed his name. The moment the ink dried, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a beginning. We left the office and stood outside in the soft light of morning. Ethan leaned against his car, staring into nothing. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I looked at him, really looked. Not the version of him that had lied and schemed and disappointed everyone, but the kid who used to sneak peanut butter sandwiches to the barn cats and ride Grandpa's tractor like it was a spaceship. "The farmhouse still needs fixing," I said finally. He blinked. "You want my help?" "You're not my business partner," I clarified, "but you're still my brother. If you want to earn your way back, you show up. Every day, you do the work. No shortcuts." He gave a weak, grateful nod. "Okay." And that's how it started. Not with a hug or a tearful apology, but with a quiet agreement to do better, to rebuild. Not just the land, but something between us that we both thought had been lost forever. The first few mornings back at the farmhouse were quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. The silence wasn't soft, it was heavy. Like the land itself remembered the betrayal and was holding its breath, waiting to see if we were serious about repairing what had been broken. Ethan showed up early every day, surprising me with how little he complained. At first, he was clumsy with the tools and clueless about the work, but he kept showing up, sleeves rolled, eyes a little more focused than I'd ever seen. We didn't talk much that first week. There wasn't much to say. The air between us still carried the weight of everything unsaid, years of resentment, mistakes, and the mess we were both trying to clean up, one nail and board at a time. We started with the barn, the same one Grandpa used to keep his old tractor in, the one that once held summer hayrides and family photos taped to the walls. The roof sagged, doors were half-hinged, and raccoons had clearly declared it their kingdom. But beneath the layers of dust and cobwebs, the bones of the place were still solid, like the land hadn't given up on us, even if we'd given up on each other. As we worked, Ethan slowly began asking questions. Not about me or Grandpa, but about the farm. The irrigation lines, the crop cycles, the weather patterns, and every time he asked, I answered. At first, flatly, but eventually with more detail. I didn't know if he was genuinely trying to learn, or if he was just trying to prove something, but either way, he was listening, and for once, not just to talk next. After about 10 days of relentless work, sore muscles, and more mosquito bites than I could count, the barn was no longer a ruin. It looked like a place again. On the 11th morning, Ethan brought breakfast, real breakfast, not gas station snacks. Eggs, biscuits, fresh coffee. He didn't say anything about it, just handed me a plate like it was normal. We sat on the tailgate of the pickup, eating in silence until he finally broke it. "You ever think about what Grandpa would say if he saw all this?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about it a lot, actually. I imagined him sitting in his rocking chair on the porch, arms folded, watching us fix the place he built with his own 2 hands. I imagined him saying nothing but nodding once. That quiet kind of approval, that meant more than any speech. He'd probably shake his head at how long it took us to get here, I said eventually. Ethan gave a soft laugh, one that didn't sound forced. Yeah, but he'd still be glad we showed up. Later that day, we found a lockbox hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the back room of the barn. The metal was rusted, but still intact. Inside were old photos, letters, and a single cassette tape wrapped in a cloth handkerchief. No label, no date. Just Grandpa's handwriting on the cloth, for later. We drove into town and found a thrift shop that still sold cassette players. The man behind the counter looked at us like we were from another century, but we didn't care. Back at the farmhouse, we plugged it in and pressed play. The tape crackled, and then Grandpa's voice filled the room. Strong, steady, and somehow still warm through the static. "If you're hearing this," he began, "I'm guessing things went sideways. I hope I'm wrong, but if I'm not, I want you to know something. I didn't leave that land for money. I left it because it's the only thing I knew would keep you two connected, even if everything else fell apart." Ethan didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just sat there, letting his voice fill the silence we hadn't yet figured out how to break. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that felt like healing. We fixed the fencing, cleared out the vegetable garden, and repainted the front porch together. Ethan learned how to rotate soil, how to mend a cracked water pipe, and even how to tell the difference between healthy seedlings and weeds. He wasn't perfect, he messed up a lot, but he didn't walk away. Not this time. And slowly, I stopped bracing for him to fail. Because for once, he wasn't pretending. He wasn't charming anyone. He was just trying. One afternoon, we sat under the oak tree by the edge of the field, the one Grandpa planted the year Ethan was born. It was tall now, strong, casting a wide shadow. I looked over and asked him something that had been circling in my mind for days. "Why didn't you ever tell me you felt like you had to fix everything alone?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Because I didn't think you'd care. You were always so far ahead, smart, focused. You didn't need anyone." I didn't want to look weak. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. Needing help isn't weak. Lying and stealing, that's what broke trust. Not the fear. The fear I could have understood. He nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. "I know that now." That night, as we locked up the barn, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Ethan looked at the farm like it mattered again. Not for what it could sell for, not for some shortcut to money, but for what it represented. Family, redemption, a second chance. We didn't need to say it out loud. Some truths speak for themselves. But just when things started feeling like they were falling into place, the past came knocking again, this time in the form of a letter addressed to both of us, delivered by a courier with a clipboard and a grim expression. It was from the buyer Ethan had tried to sell the farm to. Turns out the man wasn't some average real estate flipper. He was a high-stakes developer with deep pockets, a legal team, and a reputation for not taking losses quietly. And he wasn't thrilled to hear the sale had been voided. Inside the envelope was a legal threat, a demand for reimbursement of incurred fees and damages due to the broken agreement. Nearly $400,000. Ethan's face went pale again. "Can he do that?" he asked me, panic seeping back into his voice. I didn't have an answer. But Charles Whitman might. We met with him the next morning, bringing the letter and a stack of documents. Whitman read the letter twice, then looked up. "He can try," he said slowly, "but he doesn't have legal ground to stand on. The sale was never valid. Ethan never had the full authority to make that deal." "So what happens now?" Ethan asked. Whitman leaned back in his chair, tapping the envelope thoughtfully. We respond. Firmly. Professionally. And we don't back down. If he wants to take it to court, we'll win. But it'll be messy. I glanced at Ethan, who was already spiraling at the thought of more legal battles. "Let me handle the reply," I told Whitman. "But let's make one thing clear in it: this land was never for sale. Not then. Not now." Later that day, I typed the response myself. Clear, direct. Not emotional, just factual. And I signed it with both our names. Because whether I liked it or not, we were in this together now. The rebuild wasn't just about wood and dirt and fences. It was about repairing decades of fractured trust, of resentment and silence and wrong turns. The letter was mailed the next morning. And as we stood side by side on the farmhouse porch watching the truck pull away, I realized something. The past would keep testing us. There'd be more letters, more ghosts, maybe more moments where we stumbled. But for the first time, we weren't pretending anymore. We were facing it all, together. And maybe, just maybe, that was what Grandpa had hoped for all along. It didn't take long for the response to trigger a reaction. Less than a week after we mailed the letter to the developer, another envelope arrived, this one even thicker, hand-delivered and stamped with the name of a major law firm out of Houston. Ethan opened it with shaky hands while I stood across the table, already bracing for the worst. Inside was a full lawsuit. Civil damages, breach of verbal contract, intentional interference, and a laundry list of other claims that, while legally toothless, still packed enough threats to turn your stomach. They were accusing us of fraud. Ethan looked up at me, color draining from his face. I can't handle this, Ava. I'm not built for courtrooms and depositions and media vultures. What if we lose? I picked up the papers and flipped through the legal jargon, page after page of exaggerated claims and veiled intimidation. They're bluffing, I said, though my voice didn't sound as confident as I wanted it to. They're hoping we panic, fold, and offer a payout, but this lawsuit won't survive the first hearing. Still, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. A case like this didn't have to be strong, it just had to be loud. And loud was expensive. We met with Whitman the following morning. He was already sipping coffee and scanning a printout of the lawsuit, lips pursed in silent irritation. I've dealt with these guys before, he said, sliding the folder aside. They build these cases like scarecrows imposing from a distance, but hollow up close. Their goal is to get a settlement before it ever sees a courtroom. Ethan leaned forward, desperate. So what do we do? Whitman looked between us, calm but firm. We do what your grandfather would have done. We fight back, but quietly, strategically, and above all, truthfully. He paused, then added, unless there's something else I need to know. I didn't hesitate. Nothing's been left out. Ethan nodded, though I caught a flicker in his expression, subtle, almost invisible, but enough to make me wonder. Whitman offered to bring in a litigation partner to prepare the response, someone with a reputation for handling high-pressure developer cases. I agreed immediately. Ethan didn't say much after that. He just stared at the carpet like it might offer an escape hatch. Back at the farm, the mood changed. The fear crept in like fog. I found myself pacing more, eating less, my sleep fractured by flashes of worst-case scenarios. Ethan, once steadily improving, started withdrawing again. He showed up to work later, made excuses to leave early, and his eyes darted every time his phone buzzed. Something was off. And by the end of the week, I had a sinking feeling that I wasn't the only one facing secrets. That Saturday, while Ethan was out on a supply run, I went looking. Not to snoop, not really, just to understand what was still hanging in the air between us. I checked the barn, then the office Grandpa had kept in the back room. It hadn't been used in years, but the filing cabinets were still locked and labeled. I tried the desk drawers, nothing new, but inside the closet, buried beneath old tarps and fencing wire, was a shoebox. Inside were papers, some I recognized from estate files, and some I didn't. Receipts, notes, and then a contract. Not from the failed Miami deal, but another one, older, dated months before Grandpa passed. It was an offer from the same developer who was suing us now, except this offer wasn't for $3 million. It was for $7 million. My throat tightened as I flipped through the pages. It had Grandpa's name on it, and at the bottom, a single note written in his unmistakable handwriting, denied. Not their legacy. I sat on the floor, staring at the letter, feeling the air leave the room. This wasn't just about money. It never had been. That man had wanted the land for years. And Ethan knew. The next morning, I waited for him on the porch. He walked up the path with a half-hearted smile and 2 coffees in hand, but the moment he saw my face, he froze. I held up the contract. You lied. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. I didn't know you'd find that. You knew about the developer. Before Grandpa died, you knew this was more than some failed investment scam. His jaw clenched. I didn't think it mattered. He turned it down. I figured that was the end of it. But then Grandpa passed, and the offer came again lower this time, but it was still a way out. A way out for you, I said sharply. Not for the family, not for what this place stood for. Ethan lowered his head. I panicked. Everything was falling apart. Mia was pressuring me to take the deal, and I told myself it was just land, that Grandpa wouldn't care if I used it to keep us afloat. But he did care, I snapped. Enough to leave proof. Enough to warn us. And you buried it. He sat down hard on the steps, elbows on his knees, shame clinging to every breath. I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I just didn't want to lose everything again. You didn't lose it, I said. You gave it away. Piece by piece. Lie by lie. He looked up at me, eyes raw. So what now? Do you want me gone? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to. Part of me still wanted to throw him off the property and never look back. But the other part, the part that remembered what Grandpa said on that tape, the part that saw Ethan trying even when he kept falling short, couldn't. No, I said finally, but I need the truth. All of it. No more hiding, no more half stories. If I'm going to keep standing next to you in this fight, I have to know you're not going to cave the second things get hard. He nodded slowly. No more lies. I promise. It wasn't a solution, but it was something, and in a story like ours, something was enough for now. We delivered the newly found contract to Whitman the next day. He scanned it with narrowed eyes, then let out a slow breath. This changes the case, he said, dramatically. It proves the developer knew about the will, that he attempted to go around it even before Henry passed. If we bring this forward, their entire lawsuit collapses under bad faith dealings. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my spine ease. Then let's do it, I said. Let's end this. Whitman smiled, more wolf than lawyer, with pleasure. By the time the court date came, the other side didn't even show. Their attorneys filed a motion to drop the case 2 days before the hearing. No apologies, no settlement, just silence. Which, for men like them, was as close to an admission of guilt as we'd ever get. Ethan and I sat in the courthouse hallway afterward, stunned. It was over. The land was ours, unchallenged, protected. For the first time in months, there were no looming letters, no buried lies, no threat dangling over our heads, just the quiet, unexpected weight of peace. On the drive back to the farm, neither of us said much, but the silence wasn't heavy this time. It was full of everything we'd survived, full of every truth that had come crawling into the light. And as we pulled into the driveway, the sky opened just a little, letting sunlight streak through the clouds like it had been waiting for us to finally look up. Ethan got out first, walking toward the barn like he belonged there. And maybe finally he did. The calm didn't last long. Peace, it turns out, doesn't knock, it just slips in quietly when no one's looking. And just as quietly disappears when old ghosts show up at your door. 3 weeks after the lawsuit vanished, we got another letter. But this one wasn't from a lawyer or a developer. It came in a plain white envelope, no return address, but the handwriting on the front made my stomach clench before I even opened it. Mia. The letter inside was short. Just a few lines scribbled in her usual rushed penmanship. I know things ended messy. I didn't mean for it to go the way it did. I have something I need to return. Something Henry gave me before he passed. It belongs to both of you. No explanation. No contact info, just a PO box number and a date. She wanted to meet. Ethan read it over my shoulder in stunned silence. She's lying, he muttered, trying to reel me back in. I didn't answer. I didn't trust Mia either, but her timing was strange. She'd vanished the moment the money ran dry, yet now that everything was stable again, she was back? I had questions, but more than that, I had a bad feeling. Because if she was telling the truth, if Grandpa had given her something directly, it meant there was more to the story than even Whitman knew. We decided to meet her at a small cafe just outside of Wimberley, far enough from the farm that it wouldn't feel personal. Ethan offered to go alone, but I wasn't about to let him walk into a mess we both might have to clean up. When we arrived, she was already there, sitting under a sun hat, sunglasses on, coffee untouched. She looked thinner, sharper somehow, like life had chewed through her pride and left the shell behind. The second she saw us, she stood up, smile twitching at the corners. "Ethan, Ava, you both look grounded." "Cut to it, Mia," I said, sitting down. "Why now?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "Because I found this last week. It was in one of my old boxes from the apartment. Henry gave it to me the week before he died. Said I'd know when to give it to you. At the time, I thought it was just a gesture. I didn't even open it. But after everything fell apart, I forgot it was there. I took it cautiously." The envelope was sealed with wax deep green, the kind Grandpa used on holiday letters. My name and Ethan's were written side by side. No title, no instructions, just our names as equals. I waited until we were back in the truck before opening it. Ethan sat silently, fingers pressed against his mouth like he was holding something in. Inside was a handwritten note, folded around a small legal document. The note was short. Like Grandpa knew he didn't have time for another long story. If you're reading this, then the weight has shifted. And so has the truth. There's a second clause and inheritance condition I didn't include in the public will. I didn't want lawyers meddling. I wanted your choice to matter. Whoever chooses to stay and run the farm for at least 1 full year without selling, leasing, or abandoning it will inherit the land outright. No split, no debate, full ownership. But you must live on it, work it, keep it breathing. The other can leave, free and clear, with no legal claims. But only one can stay. I'm sorry for the pressure this puts on you, but I trust you more than the world ever deserved to. I read the note twice, then handed it to Ethan. His hands shook as he scanned the lines. And when he finished, he didn't say anything. He just stared out the windshield at the Texas hills, face unreadable. Back at the farm, we didn't talk for hours. We worked in different corners of the property, pretending the air between us wasn't suddenly thick with a question neither of us wanted to ask out loud. Which one of us stays? That night, we sat on the porch, the sky full of stars, too quiet to be comforting. Ethan finally broke the silence. He gave us a test. "No," I said. He gave us a choice. He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "You should stay. It's obvious. You've done more. You saved the farm. You rebuilt it. You deserve it." "That's not how this works," I replied. He didn't say the best one stays. He said the one who chooses it, who commits. Ethan looked at me, not with guilt or defiance, but something harder to name: resignation. "I can't do this forever. I'm learning, yeah, and I'm grateful. But this life, it's not in my bones the way it is in yours." I didn't say anything. I didn't want him to feel like he was being pushed out, but I also didn't want to pretend I hadn't already made my decision weeks ago. I belonged here. I always had. I'd just been too angry to admit it. The next morning, we went to Whitman with the letter. He wasn't surprised. In fact, he smiled the moment he saw the seal. He was a smart man, Whitman said, running a hand along the edges of the paper. People thought Henry trusted lawyers, but he trusted instinct more. He wanted this to be a decision from the heart, not a courtroom. He filed the letter and said he'd prepare the paperwork for final ownership transfer once the year was complete. Until then, the condition stood: we had to live here, work it, keep it whole. If either of us left early, the land would default to the other. No loopholes, no grace period, just commitment or surrender. Ethan signed the acknowledgement first. No drama, no hesitation. Just a quiet acceptance that said more than words ever could. I signed next. It felt heavy and light at the same time, like closing a chapter you didn't know you'd been writing for years. The days that followed felt different. The urgency was gone, replaced with something steadier. Ethan started packing slowly, not out of sadness, but out of respect. He didn't flee this time. He took his time, said goodbye to the barn, walked the perimeter one last time, and even planted a row of lavender along the path he used to drive up. So the next idiot who tries to sell this place has to walk through something beautiful first, he said, only half joking. On his last morning, he left a note on the kitchen table, nothing poetic. Just a thank you, a promise to visit, and a key to the workshop even though I already had a copy. I watched him drive away from the porch, standing in the same spot Grandpa once stood when we were kids, watching us ride bikes down the gravel road. And just like that, the house was quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Weeks passed, and spring pushed its way into the soil. I planted new crops, repainted the shutters, and fixed the broken wind chimes on the back porch. Every night, I made tea and listened to the cassette one more time, Grandpa's voice steady and strong, reminding me why I stayed. He hadn't wanted division. He'd wanted clarity. And maybe, in his own frustrating way, he knew this would force it. Because choices like this, the ones that matter, they shape more than land. They shape people. Ethan's name wasn't on the deed anymore, but somehow, he still lingered in the soil, in the shed where he'd left his tools, in the way the porch steps creaked just a little less from where he'd repaired them. And then, one morning, I got a call. Not from Whitman, not from Ethan, from a woman claiming to be Henry's former nurse. She said she had something I needed to see, something he left behind that no one ever mentioned. Her voice was soft but urgent. He told me to hold on to it until after the land was decided, she said. He didn't want it interfering, but now it's time you saw it. I didn't ask what it was. I just said I'd be there tomorrow. The nurse's house sat at the edge of town, tucked behind a garden blooming wild with late spring jasmine and rosemary. The kind of place where time felt slower and silence wasn't something to fix. Her name was Margaret, and she greeted me like she'd known me for years, even though we'd never met. Her hands were worn but warm, her voice quiet but steady. She didn't rush. She made tea, set out a plate of biscuits like we were going to talk about the weather. But I knew better. And she did too. Once we sat at her kitchen table, she slid a small wooden box across the table toward me. He gave this to me the day before he passed, she said. Told me not to say a word until the farm was settled. Said he didn't want it clouding your judgment. He was very clear about that. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside was a sealed envelope, thicker than the one Mia had delivered, marked with my full name and a date I didn't recognize. Beneath it, folded carefully, was a photograph Grandpa Henry standing beside a woman I didn't recognize, holding a child that couldn't have been more than a year old. On the back, in that same unmistakable handwriting, were 4 words, for Ava. When ready. I didn't say anything at first. My thoughts felt like static, bouncing between curiosity, fear, and something much heavier. Margaret poured more tea and waited. No pressure, just presence. I finally asked, "Who is she?" Margaret met my eyes. Her name was Rosa. Henry loved her. Before he married your grandmother. Things didn't work out. They lost touch. But that child? That's your aunt. I blinked, unsure I heard her right. My what? She nodded slowly. Her name was Lillian. She lived up north. Quiet life. Henry kept in contact after they reconnected. Never told your father or your uncle. Said he'd already made too many mistakes with the family he had. But before he died, he made it right. I stared at the letter, my hands suddenly too still. He included her in the inheritance? Margaret smiled sadly. Not the land, not the money, something else. Something he said only you would know what to do with. I opened the envelope. Inside was a notarized document power of attorney over a separate trust fund, one Henry had built quietly over 20 years. The note explained everything. How he wanted part of his life's work to go to the family he'd once left behind. How he trusted me, not Ethan, not the courts to decide how it should be shared. Not as an obligation, as a choice. Driving home, the world felt heavier, but not in a bad way. It felt real, like layers of the past had peeled back to show the whole picture, not just the version we'd grown up with. Ethan was already at the house when I pulled up, barefoot on the porch, shirt half covered in paint. He looked at me like he knew something had changed before I even said a word. I handed him the photograph first. He stared at it for a long time, then flipped it over, his brow furrowed. Is this our aunt? I said quietly. Her name was Lillian. I explained what I'd learned, showed him the letter, the trust documents, the photograph, every piece of proof. He didn't say much, just nodded slowly and leaned back in the porch chair, letting the evening light soak into his skin, like it was the only way to process what we'd just uncovered. I guess Grandpa really did live more than one life, he said after a long pause, and somehow still found a way to make it all connect. I nodded. He didn't believe in easy truths, only whole ones. We spent the next few days figuring out what to do. The trust was sizable, not massive, but enough to change someone's future. Lillian had passed away a few years earlier, but she had a daughter, our cousin, named June. I tracked her down through one of the return addresses on the trust documents. She was a teacher in Idaho, raising 2 kids on her own after a rough divorce. When I finally reached her, I wasn't sure how to explain who I was or what I had to tell her. But when I did, her voice broke halfway through the conversation, not from shock, from relief. "He didn't forget us," she whispered. "All these years, I thought, we were just a story no one told." I mailed her the photo, the trust papers, and a long letter in my own handwriting. I didn't know her anything, but that wasn't the point. I did it because it was right. Because this story, our story, was never supposed to be about winning. It was about repairing what had been left in silence, about choosing truth even when it came late. As summer unfolded, the farm began to breathe in a new rhythm. The fences held strong. The soil gave more than it took. And for the first time in years, it felt like the land was watching us, not with judgment, but with patience. Ethan returned on weekends, not because he had to, because he wanted to. He'd taken a job at a local tech co-op, finally putting his ambition somewhere that didn't require shortcuts. Sometimes he brought tools, sometimes just coffee and stories. We'd work quietly, then sit under the oak tree like we used to, the kind of silence that felt earned, not forced. The lavender he planted had bloomed purple across the drive, soft and steady, like forgiveness with roots. On the 1-year anniversary of the ownership clause, Whitman arrived with papers. It was official. The land was mine now, fully, legally, spiritually. I signed without hesitation. Not because I wanted to own it, because I had already chosen it long before the ink touched the page. That night, I stood in the field alone. The sky open above me, wind moving through the tall grass like a quiet song. Only the land could hum. I didn't cry, I didn't laugh. I just breathed. And I thanked Grandpa out loud for trusting me with something bigger than land. He had built this legacy not as a monument, but as a mirror, one that showed who we were and who we could become if we stopped running and started staying. Weeks later, I got a postcard from June. A picture of her kids playing in a park, grinning wide, grass-stained knees and ice cream smiles. On the back, she wrote, "Thank you for seeing the whole story, for remembering what he built." I pinned it to the fridge. Next to it was the old photograph. Grandpa, Rosa, Lillian. 3 faces from another lifetime. 3 pieces of the puzzle I didn't know I'd been holding all along. Sometimes people ask me why I stayed, why I didn't go back to the city or chase something bigger. And I tell them the truth. Because this place held every piece of me I didn't know I'd lost. Because it gave me something no job ever could. History with purpose. Because when everything else fell apart, the land didn't. It just waited. And because legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you choose to carry forward. Story 2. It was meant to be the most joyous day of my life. I had been dreaming about this day for years. With family and friends at my side, my wedding day in Chicago was supposed to be a joyous and loving event. Rather, it became a nightmare that destroyed all of my convictions. It was a lovely ceremony. The music was not loud. The visitors were beaming, and the flowers were beautifully placed. I felt a surge of eagerness and excitement as I glanced around the room. I was eager to start our life together, and Peter and I had spent months preparing for this day. However, things became worse as the evening wore on. It began when Miss S. Johnson, Peter's mother, came up to me wearing a severe expression. In her late 50s, she exuded a sense of dominance that frequently overwhelmed others around her. She remarked in a tone brimming with contempt, "Scarlett, I have to talk to you." In the hopes that it was a small worry, I accompanied her to a more peaceful area of the event. Miss S. Johnson's face, however, was red with rage. Her eyes narrowed as she said, "You've been so disrespectful today. I feel ashamed in front of all of these people because of you." I was surprised. I had only been kind and considerate. "What are you discussing?" I asked, attempting to seem calm. She didn't give me an opportunity to clarify. "Don't pretend to be innocent," she said. "You believe you may act whatever you want when you join this family? You are an embarrassment." Just then, Peter, who had been chatting with the visitors, approached. His countenance was impenetrable when he turned from his mother to me. "What's happening?" Although it sounded like he already knew, he inquired. With a raised voice, "Miss S." Johnson stated, "Scarlett has been disrespectful. Everyone's day has been wrecked by her." Before I could protect myself, anger distorted Peter's face. "Is this accurate?" His eyes were sharp as he demanded, "Have you been a nuisance?" "No," I replied, stinging from his charge. "I've done nothing incorrectly. All I wanted was to have fun at our wedding." Peter's eyes, however, became hard. "You and my mother have made a fool of yourselves," he said. He spoke loudly enough for guests in the vicinity to hear. "This is not acceptable." Nothing could have prepared me for what came next, even though the words hurt. Peter shocked me by slapping me across the face with his uplifted hand. The room reverberated with the sound of the slap, and I experienced a wave of embarrassment. In addition to the physical agony, the humiliation of being struck in front of everyone also caused my face to burn. There was silence in the room. Everyone looked at each other uneasily, but nobody spoke out. Peter's mother grinned contentedly, as though she had achieved some sort of triumph. "My mother has been dishonored by you, a big lady," Peter shouted, his voice filled with hate. "I can't believe I married someone like you." I stood there astonished, tears welling up in my eyes. The audience was a swirl of stunned faces. I wanted to escape, to hide from the world, but instead I found myself standing transfixed, unable to fathom what had just happened. Peter's action wasn't simply startling, it was a terrible blow in front of all those people. I felt my dignity slide away as the visitors slowly resumed their talks. I felt the weight of their criticism on me. The laughing and music seemed to mock my suffering. When I eventually managed to collect myself, I realized I couldn't stay there any longer. I left the reception and went to the back of the venue to find a quiet spot away from onlookers. I started crying uncontrollably as I attempted to comprehend what had happened that night. This day had always seemed like a dream come true to me, like something out of a fairy tale. Rather, it had become a sharp reminder of the brutal reality I was living with. I had believed that my marriage would provide me with stability and happiness, but it had turned out to be a farce. There was more to Peter and his mother's actions than a passing outburst of rage. It gave me a better understanding of a poisonous and abusive relationship than I had previously had. The evening's humiliation served as a sobering reminder. I was aware that this could not be the conclusion of my tale. I silently vowed to myself as I gazed at my mirror in the gloom. I wouldn't put up with their inhumanity any longer. No matter how hard the path ahead may be, I would pursue justice and reveal the truth. Once a sign of fresh starts, the wedding has now become a pivotal moment in my life. In addition to igniting a fire within of me, the betrayal and anguish I experienced were intense. Although I was aware that the path of taking back my life and pursuing justice would be difficult and drawn out, I was resolved to meet it head-on. This was only the start of my battle. I felt as though I was living in a fog during the weeks after the catastrophic wedding. The knowledge that my marriage had been a front hurt much more than the agony of Peter's public disgrace. Notwithstanding the chaos, I was aware that I couldn't let the brutality of Peter and Mrs. Johnson to control my life. I had to take charge and figure out how to defend myself. I started my plan by gathering evidence. I was aware that it would need more than just my word to expose Peter and his mother. I wanted evidence of the financial and emotional harm I had suffered. At that point, I made the decision to work with Detective Robert Hayes, a private investigator renowned for his tact and efficiency. I contacted him, and he agreed to take on my case following a quick consultation. In his mid-40s, Detective Hayes was composed and intelligent. He paid close attention as I related the wedding's circumstances and the pattern of violence I had endured. "I know how hard this must be for you," he remarked. "But we can solve this if you're prepared to cooperate with me." With a flicker of optimism, I nodded. I said, "I'll do whatever it takes. All I want is for the truth to be revealed." Accompanied by Detective Hayes, I began documenting what I was saying to Miss S. Johnson and Peter. Although it was difficult and uncomfortable, I knew it was essential. I made careful to record every chat I had with them by concealing a little recorder in my purse. I quickly came to see how nasty and manipulative they really were. Over dinner one evening, Peter and I got into a furious dispute. As I was recording the talk, I recall listening to Peter's violent outbursts with a mixture of dread and resolve. He replied, his voice brimming with contempt, "You're so useless. Why are you unable to accomplish anything correctly?" I make an effort to remain composed. I said, "I'm doing my hardest." "But you're so critical all the time." Peter's answer was poisonous. "Your greatest effort is insufficient. Both my mother and I are burdened by you. It is visible to everybody." I became more aware of how pervasive their abuse was the more I listened to these tapes. The humiliation in public wasn't the only thing at stake. For years, there had been a pattern of emotional brutality. As I started to piece together a story about their actions, my resolve to expose them grew. Detective Hayes, meantime, was occupied with looking into their money transactions. He investigated their accounts and performed background checks to seek for any indications of misconduct. A few weeks later, he came back with some unsettling news. "I discovered some questionable transactions," he claimed. His expression was grave. "It appears that Miss S., Johnson, and Peter may have committed financial fraud." As Detective Hayes explained the specifics, my heart was pounding. Huge amounts of money are being moved between other accounts. They appear to be stealing money from customers. Though unexpected, the discovery made sense. Miss S. Johnson had always played an important role in Peter's business, which was that of a financial counselor. Their violent actions were starting to take on a darker aspect. They were more than simply harsh and domineering. They committed crimes. I was aware that removing them would require more than just these financial documents. Our chat records were essential, but I also had to figure out how to connect all the pieces of evidence. My best buddy Anna stepped in at that point. Anna, who was in her early 30s, had a keen mind and a deep loyalty. She had provided me with support and encouragement throughout this turbulent period, acting as a rock. When I presented Anna with the proof, she reacted with a mixture of astonishment and resolve. She looked at the financial and recording records and remarked, "We have to do something with this. It's no longer just about you. They are doing grave offenses." Anna and I started going over everything we had gathered. We listened to the recordings that highlighted cases of emotional abuse and compared them to financial records. Although the labor was demanding, it was also empowering. Every piece of evidence we looked at gave me a fresh feeling of direction. We were going through the papers one evening when Anna looked up from her notes. "You've come so far already, Scarlett," she added. "A lot of proof has been acquired by you. It's time to move forward now." I nodded, feeling both apprehensive and determined. "I know," I answered. "I'm prepared to reveal them. They must be held responsible for their actions." We intended to host a sizable gathering at which I would tell the truth about Peter and Miss S. Johnson. Making it a public event was something I wanted to ensure. Thus, everyone would be able to see their brutality and dishonesty. The thought was exciting and intimidating at the same time. It was the last phase of my transformation from a victim to a person who would stand up for justice. I could feel the weight of the impending revelation pressing down on me as we got ready for the occasion. I was motivated by a strong sense of justice and a desire to take back my life with Detective Hayes' assistance, though, in spite of my fear, Anna's steadfast assistance and the proof we had acquired, I was prepared to take on whatever lay ahead. Although the journey had been difficult, it was bringing me to a pivotal moment. No matter how challenging it might be, I was resolved to defend myself and reveal the truth. I knew that this was my opportunity to take charge of my life and fight for justice as the event day drew near. The tension was evident on the day of the event. I had carefully planned it, making sure that everything was in its proper place. The location was a large hall that was tastefully furnished and exuded a sense of refinement that contrasted with the reality I was going to disclose. In an effort to make sure that as many people as possible would see and hear the truth, I had invited friends, family, and media representatives. I experienced a mixture of resolve and anxiety as the guests started to fill the hall. Excitement and curiosity filled the room, but I was unable to get rid of the butterflies in my stomach. Among the guests were Mrs. Johnson and Peter, who stood beside me grinning confidently. They were unaware of what was going to happen. A number of speeches and toasts kicked off the event, establishing a joyous mood. I felt like an actor in my own drama as I acted out the role of the gracious hostess. As the moment drew near, I tried to relax by taking deep breaths. I took the podium to make my announcement when it was time. All eyes were on me as the crowd fell silent. I could see Miss S., Johnson and Peter looking at each other, still grinning but with a tinge of interest. I paused to collect my thoughts. I could feel the pressure of what I was going to do. I appreciate everyone's attendance today. I started, speaking steadily but passionately. Although the purpose of this event was to commemorate a fresh start, it has evolved into something far more important. The guests appeared interested, so I went on. I'm going to reveal something that has been kept a secret for far too long. It concerns the reality that lies beneath the facade that Peter and his mother have upheld. I saw Peter's smile falter as I spoke, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. Miss S. Johnson's expression remained neutral, but I could sense the tension in her posture. I took a deep breath and pressed a button on a remote control, and the large screen behind me flickered to life. The screen displayed a series of audio recordings and financial documents. Peter and I were having a disagreement when the first recording started to play. The audio clearly captured Peter's angry outbursts, his harsh words cutting through the room like a knife. The guests listened in stunned silence as the recording played, revealing the emotional abuse I had endured. I saw a mix of shock and sympathy on their faces as they heard Peter call me names and belittle me. Next, the screen switched to the financial documents that Detective Hayes had uncovered. The documents showed large sums of money being transferred between various accounts, highlighting the fraudulent activities Peter and Miss S. Johnson were involved in. The figures were staggering and the evidence was clear. As the recordings and documents were presented, Peter's demeanor changed. His face grew pale and his eyes darted around the room, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. Miss S. Johnson's face flushed with anger and embarrassment, and she looked around helplessly as the truth was laid bare. I could feel a sense of empowerment as I continued. These recordings and documents are evidence of the abuse and fraud that Peter and his mother have perpetrated. They have manipulated and controlled not just me, but many others. It's time for the truth to be known. The media representatives in the room were busy taking notes and capturing every moment. The atmosphere shifted from one of celebration to one of revelation and outrage. The guests were murmuring among themselves, their shock evident. Peter finally spoke, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "This is ridiculous," he said. "These are all falsehoods and distortions. You're trying to ruin us." But his objections were drowned out by the overwhelming evidence. The visitors, now fully aware of the situation, began to respond with indignation. Many expressed their disgust and worry, while others gave support and sorrow. The room was abuzz with chatter, and I felt a feeling of vindication as the evening drew to a close. Peter and Miss S. Johnson tried to leave, but their attempts to escape the fallout were thwarted by the media and the crowd. Their once confident facade had crumbled, and they were left to face the consequences of their actions. I watched as the truth of the situation sunk in for them. The mask of respectability they had established was destroyed, and the reality was out for everyone to see. For me, it was a moment of triumph and a huge step in reclaiming my life. The evening had been a success and exposed Peter and Miss S. Johnson, but it was also a personal win. I had taken charge of my story and fought back against the unfairness I had suffered. As I gazed around at the astonished expressions and the frenzy of action, I felt a mix of relief and resolve. The days following the catastrophe were a frenzy of action and emotion. The truth about Peter and Miss S. Johnson had been exposed, and the repercussions was severe. The media coverage was unrelenting, and the public reaction was a combination of fury and sympathy for me. Although I was now a representation of justice and tenacity, the actual job was only getting started. Within the next weeks, the media craze grew more intense. Every possible angle was used to examine Peter and Miss S. Johnson. Their lives were exposed to the public. Investigations started to uncover all of their illegal activities. When the money fraud allegations were taken seriously, a judicial struggle that threatened to deprive them of their fortune and reputations confronted the previously self-assured pair. Even while the media was concentrating on them, I knew that my own journey was far from finished. To make sure I got the justice I wanted, I had to deal with the judicial system. My attorney, a knowledgeable expert who had supported me during this process, built a strong case using the information we had acquired. To create a compelling case against Peter and Miss S. Johnson, we assembled the testimony, financial records, and recordings. Despite the intimidating atmosphere of the courtroom, I approached it with a steely determination. I testified about the fraud and abuse as the trial got underway. Even though the process was extremely taxing, I was committed to finishing it. I was reminded of my suffering and humiliation every day in court. However, I was also reminded of my bravery and strength. Although Peter and Miss S. Johnson made an effort to defend themselves, the overwhelming evidence against them outweighed their arguments. They made fruitless attempts to discredit me and deny the tapes. The magnitude of their misconduct is evident in the financial records, and the reality caused their reputation to collapse. The judge's decision marked the culmination of the courtroom drama. After being convicted of financial fraud, Peter was mandated to reimburse his victims. Miss S. Johnson was also subject to fines and a damaged reputation as a result of her actions. The court acknowledged the emotional trauma I had endured and awarded me a divorce. It was a bittersweet court triumph. Justice was served, which was a relief, but I had suffered during the process. I was thankful yet fatigued. I had prevailed after a protracted and challenging struggle. Although it would take time for the emotional wounds to heal, I felt a great feeling of accomplishment and closure. I made the decision to begin a new chapter in my life. When the court struggle was over, I left the commotion and memories of my previous life behind and went to a quiet house outside of Austin, Texas. I felt at ease and that I had a new starting in the new setting. I thought back on my voyage as I sat on my porch and watched the sun set over the undulating hills. Although the path had been difficult, full of suffering and difficulties, it had also been one of fortitude and self-determination. I had taken back my life and done the right thing. I was really appreciative of Detective Hayes's and my closest friend Anna's steadfast support, which had been priceless. The transformation from victim to victor had been life-changing. I had overcome the most difficult times in my life and come out stronger and more resolved. The abuse and illegal activity of Peter and Miss S. Johnson had come to light, and I had taken charge of my story. I experienced a profound sense of contentment and tranquility as I gazed at the serene surroundings of my new residence. I had discovered a new purpose and battled for fairness. I had moved on from the past, and the future held a wealth of opportunities. My narrative was one of justice, resiliency, and empowerment. It served as a reminder that people may find the will to fight back and take back their lives even in the face of extreme tragedy. I had conquered my demons, revealed the truth, and come out on top. In the end, the long and challenging path had brought me to a point of contentment and serenity. I thus welcomed the new chapter of my life with optimism and resolve. With the past behind me and a bright future ahead, I had taken charge of my own fate and demonstrated that one could find the fortitude to shine even in the most difficult circumstances. Story 3. My avaricious mother-in-law insisted on an additional $5,000 for shopping. She struck me hard with a baseball bat when I refused. While my husband stood there, watching this drama play out and doing nothing to stop his mother, I fell to the ground. I was furious. I vowed to exact retribution when I left the house that evening. When they got up the following morning, I had a huge, startling surprise in store for them. I'm Lisa, and I'd want to tell you my tale. A tale that started in a dreamlike realm before swiftly devolving into a nightmare. I was a 29-year-old Dallas, Texas-based internet entrepreneur who was making around $30 a month while flourishing in the online market. My life could have appeared enviable to others. I established my own hours, worked from home, and relished the results of my effort. In private, however, I was having difficulties with a poisonous marriage to my husband, Ryan, and his domineering mother, Evelyn. It all began with Ryan. We were both aspirational and hopeful when we first met in college. Our aspirations for success were similar. We thought we could take on the world together for a time. 3 years ago, we got married with the belief that love would carry us through anything. But reality sank in as the months passed. About 8 months ago, Ryan lost his job. Then everything started to fall apart. I didn't mind helping us at first. I had, after all, started my company from nothing, but I began to feel like I was carrying a mountain of burden. I put forth more effort to make sure we had groceries, the mortgage paid, and our bills paid. But I was met with demands rather than appreciation. Ryan's mother, Evelyn, was constantly lurking close by, her eyes sparkling with avarice. She had her own opinions about how I should spend my money, and she was in her late 50s. She never failed to remind me of my responsibilities as a daughter-in-law. She would add, "You're doing so well, Lisa," with a phony sweetness in her voice. "You must be able to provide your family a little extra." She first requested a few $100 to pay for her opulent resort vacation. Ryan urged me to assist her even though I was hesitant. With beseeching eyes, he continued, "It's just a little something to make her happy." I gave in since I believed it to be innocuous. However, it didn't end there. Over time, Evelyn's demands grew increasingly ridiculous. She summoned me into the living room one evening. "We need to discuss, Lisa." Her voice was solemn as she started. "My clothing seems a little run down, and I've been thinking about it. I need at least $5,000 to go shopping." "You can afford it." My heart was racing when I froze. "Evelyn, everything is already covered by me. My salary covers everything, including groceries, utilities, and the mortgage," I answered, attempting to speak steadily. "I cannot continue to give you money for frivolities." Her face contorted into a disdainful one. "You believe that you may disregard your obligations since you make a little money?" "Lisa, this is also your family." I don't want to acknowledge how deeply her remark struck me. "Family? Are you referring to the family that makes no contributions to the home?" Wearing thin, I flung back my patience. I thought Ryan would intervene to protect me, but he said nothing. He looked down. It seemed like a betrayal to stay silent. The tension in the room suddenly exploded. Evelyn sprang to her feet, her annoyance exploding. "Perhaps you should leave this family if you are unable to assist," she shouted. Anger made her cheeks flush. "Perhaps you should discuss donating with Ryan." With a surge of defiance, I yelled back. She grabbed a baseball bat that was resting against the wall out of wrath as her eyes contracted. She threw it at me before I could respond. It hit me in the face before I could even react, and the pain shot through my body. Tears of horror filled my eyes as I staggered back, grasping my cheek. "Evelyn, what the devil?" I tried to catch my breath as I gasped. Desperate for Ryan to step in, I turned to face him, but he remained still, taking in the spectacle as though it were on a reality show. He was unchangeable. My heart grew heavier. It was then that I knew I was really alone. "You lack gratitude." Evelyn's voice reverberated across the room as she yelled. "Do you really believe that you can keep taking without providing anything in return? This isn't where you belong." When I saw the extent of their deception, it was a game changer. As I stumbled back, the grief in my heart overpowering the agony in my face, I experienced a mixture of anger and despair. I was shocked that I had allowed things to go this bad. I packed my stuff that night. The fact that Ryan wasn't home didn't bother me. I was left on my own when he went out with pals. I packed up my things and made the decision to take back my life, even if it meant going back to my parents' house. I had an odd wave of relief as I drove away, tears running down my face. I felt as though I had at last been released from invisible bonds. However, that relief was accompanied by a brewing rage and a desire for retribution. I remained at my parents' house in the days that followed, thinking about what I should do. I was aware that I needed to get a divorce. I had had enough of Ryan and his mother controlling me. I had had enough of being handled more like a bank than a relationship. As I considered Ryan's treachery and Evelyn's harsh remarks, my determination grew stronger. I could see them pleading with me to come back. As Ryan pledged to change, I pictured him trying to win people over. Evelyn, too. All sweetness and light, as nothing had occurred. I wouldn't fall for it again. But I had a plan. I needed to take charge of the situation. If they wanted me back, they would have to pay for it. The notion of forcing them transfer ownership of the house into my name flashed in my imagination. It was a risky move, but I was done being the victim. As I plotted my revenge, I couldn't help but feel a mix of dread and excitement. I had a long way to go, but I was determined to regain my life and my value, and I was ready to face whatever happened next. Little did I know, the battle was just beginning. Days turned into a week after I left, and the initial pain of my departure began to fade, replaced by a fierce determination. I was ready to take control of my life. My parents were supportive, offering me comfort and encouragement, reminding me that I deserved to be happy. They saw the bruises not just on my face, but on my spirit. One evening, as I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen to see Ryan's name flashing. My heart raced. I hadn't spoken to him since the night I left. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered Lisa. Ryan's voice sounded small, almost defeated. "Can we talk?" "Why?" "So you can convince me to come back." I shot back, trying to keep my anger in check. "No, it's not like that. I want to apologize." "I didn't know what to do that night, Mom," she simply. I never believed she would go that far. His words trailed off, and I could sense the remorse in his voice. "Really, Ryan? You didn't know? You stood there and watched while she attacked me. I felt the fire rising in my chest. You didn't raise a finger to aid me. I'm sorry." I was astonished. I believed I would calm her down if I didn't say anything. His apology fell hollow, and I could feel my tolerance growing thin. "Save it. Ryan, I don't want to hear your justifications. I'm done with this." I hung up, the usual sensation of betrayal seeping back. Over the following few days, I felt a combination of feelings, rage, impatience, and resolve. I realized I had to take the next move. I consulted with a lawyer about filing for divorce, laying out my intentions to guarantee that I would not be taken advantage of anymore. My lawyer outlined the process and recommended me to gather financial records and documentation of my income. The prospect of meeting Ryan and Evelyn again sent shivers down my spine, but I was adamant that Friday. I had an unexpected visitor when I was watching television. My mom stepped into the living room with a troubled face. "Lisa, someone's at the door for you," she said hesitantly. My heart fell. I knew who it was before I even answered the door. When I did, there were Ryan and Evelyn, looking oddly somber. "Can we come in?" Ryan inquired, staring at Evelyn, who had a tight-lipped expression. I stood aside, not because I wanted to, but because my curiosity was stirred. They strolled in, and I could sense the tension in the air. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice calm. "Lisa, we're here to speak about what occurred," Ryan started. Evelyn chimed in. "I've come to apologize as well. I acted poorly, and I realized that you were wounded. All we want to do is figure this out." I could still hear a hint of manipulation in her tone, even if it was milder than normal. "Work? What's missing? You intend to keep stealing from me?" I leaned against the doorframe with my arms folded. Now we knew we were mistaken. Evelyn forced a grin as she added, "I shouldn't have thrown the bat. Although I was under a lot of stress, family should support one another. Assistance. All you've done is demand and take. This is not how family members treat one another." I could feel my rage building inside of me. I will never return to that existence. "I'm going to file for divorce." Ryan's face changed from bewilderment to fear. "Lisa, you don't have to do that. We can alter things. Give me a chance, please." "Alterations? Such as?" "You watch helplessly as your mother harasses me." I gave a head shake, feeling the consequences of my choice set in. "Just listen to us, please. We'll perform better." With a desperate tone, Ryan begged. Evelyn went on. "Lisa, what do you want?" "We can figure anything out if you only give it a name." I paused. A part of me wanted to lash out, but there was also a portion that was strategic and prepared to take advantage of the situation. "You must put the house in my name if you want me back. That's the only way I'll even entertain the possibility." The room fell silent as they took in what I had said. I could see the wheels moving in Ryan's thoughts as he looked at his mother. They shared a gaze that was blatantly desperate and terrified. "Are you serious?" Ryan inquired. His voice was one of disbelief. "Never before have I been so serious." I gave a forceful response. "Whether you want me back or not is up to you." I saw a flash of terror in Evelyn's face as it contorted into a mask of wrath. "Lisa, you can't be serious. You're making too many demands." "No," I fired back. "It's you who have overindulged for too long." Ryan sighed after what seemed like an age, defeated. "All right, let's do it. We will give you the house. Don't file for divorce, please. Although Evelyn didn't appear happy, she nodded, obviously understanding that she didn't have much of an option. All right, let's just finish this. I felt a mixture of relief and discomfort as they departed. I knew this was only the beginning, but I had them exactly where I wanted them. The extent of their manipulation would soon be exposed, and the fight for my independence was far from over. Even though I was prepared to fight, I could still feel their treachery weighing heavily on me. With a renewed sense of purpose, I needed to remain strong because the next steps would be crucial. Knowing that the last step in taking back my life was still to come, I started to get ready for the changes that lay ahead. The atmosphere in my life changed after that heated exchange. A mixture of caution and hope filled me. I had to make sure that everything was done correctly as I got ready to have the house transferred into my name. I finally had the opportunity to break free from Ryan and Evelyn's control and regain my independence. Ryan and Evelyn brought a set of legal documents back to my parents' house the following week. I took a close look at the papers. My heart is racing with excitement. It was the instant I was able to reverse them. As he placed the documents on the table, Ryan said in a serious tone, "Here's the paperwork. The house will be yours once you sign this document." He gave me a hopeful but nervous look, as though he wasn't sure how I would respond. After a brief moment of hesitation, I picked up the pen. "You understand what this means, don't you?" I looked directly at Ryan and asked, "The house isn't the only issue here. I'm reclaiming my life in this way." Evelyn took a step forward, her face growing serious. "Lisa, you're being stupid. Your family is being sacrificed for a piece of real estate." "Family?" I gave a sour laugh. "Instead of treating me like a family member, you have treated me like a financial burden. This has to do with independence and self-respect." I then signed the paperwork. I experienced a spike in adrenaline as I sensed the change in power. Now that the house was officially mine, I felt like I was taking charge of my own fate for the first time. After the paperwork was finished, Ryan's attitude changed. Something darker, almost menacing, replaced his earlier desperation. "You believe you can simply leave?" he said in a low voice. "You don't know what you're getting into. What do you say?" Alarmed, I asked, "Now, Lisa, things are different." A chilly smile crept onto Ryan's face as he responded, "You're making a big mistake." In an attempt to regain control, Evelyn jumped in. "It's no longer just about you. We are related. This is something you'll regret." However, I had had enough of their threats. With unwavering resolve, I stood tall. "I will never regret reclaiming my life. I will never again allow you to control me." Tension hung in the air like a storm cloud as they departed. Heavy and gloomy, I felt relieved, yet nervous, knowing that I had only begun to wage the war for my freedom. The following 3 days passed slowly as I acclimated into my new world. I experienced a sense of freedom I hadn't had in a long time, but it was laced with uncertainty. I filed for divorce, gathering my thoughts and preparing for what I knew would be a stormy court struggle. I was ready to face anything came my way. Ryan and Evelyn would not take this from me. They had exploited me for too long, and now it was my turn to take command. I couldn't shake the idea that they would come again, anxious to restore their grip. I was prepared for their attempts to reestablish their hold on my life. Whatever games they played, I was ready to outwit them. As I lay in bed that night, looking at the ceiling, I felt a combination of emotions whirling inside me. I had taken a brave step toward my freedom, but the consequences were still hanging ahead. I knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but I had trust in my abilities to fight for my future. The fight was only getting started, and I was going to win, whatever it took. I had a thrilling surge of power once the divorce papers were filed, and the house was formally mine. However, the quiet before the storm was too evident. I was aware that Ryan and Evelyn would not tolerate this. As the days went by, I mentally practiced my lines and reminded myself of my value in order to get ready for the impending encounter. I got a surprise phone call a week later. Once more, it was Ryan. I inhaled deeply before responding. I braced myself for whatever he said. "We need to discuss, Lisa." His voice lacked its customary bluster as he started. "I don't believe you comprehend the circumstances. Tell me," I answered, maintaining a forceful tone. "I just believe that you ought to reevaluate the divorce. The home isn't the only issue here. It concerns our shared future." With a hint of desperation in his voice, he spoke. "Ryan, future. When you watched your mother mistreat me, you made your decision. I stated there was no turning back now. My heart is pounding. It worries Evelyn about you. She's afraid about losing her family." Although he begged, I could sense the menace in his voice. "Family? Do you mean the family that views me as a source of income? I've finished all of it. I'm reclaiming my life." Feeling the weight of my words, I made an assertion. That night, the anxiousness persisted even after I hung up. I made the decision to take a stroll in order to decompress. I was walking through the peaceful neighborhood. I had a persistent fear that they might retaliate. Indeed, they arrived at my parents' place the very following day. Anger and despair distorted their faces. "Lisa!" When I opened the door, Evelyn yelled, "This cannot be done simply. You're making a grave error." "Error? I believe that both of you are in error. If you believe that I will return to that life." A wave of defiance swept through me as I answered. Ryan took a step forward, his face solemn. "The consequences of your actions are unknown to you. Do you believe you can simply leave us? For myself, you don't realize what we can do." A disturbing reminder of the extent they will go to maintain power. His comments lingered in the air. However, I refused to back down. My heart is pounding. "You undervalue me. You no longer frighten me." Evelyn's face twisted with anger. "Lisa, you'll regret this. You believe you've triumphed. But it's not over yet." A chill went down my spine, but I had no intention of giving up. "No, it's finished. I will no longer be manipulated by you. With or without you, I'll battle for my happiness." Before they left, they threatened to do so. I could sense the gloom all around them, and that strengthened my will to keep going. I had had enough of playing the victim. My divorce court date came up a few weeks later. As I entered the courtroom, prepared to confront the last chapter of this agonizing tale, my pulse was pounding. I had accumulated all the necessary proof: emails, texts, and documentation of my monetary contributions. I was prepared to provide the judge with my actual circumstances. Sitting opposite me, Ryan had a dejected yet menacing appearance. Behind him, his mother's shadow hung like a black cloud, reminding me of the tyranny and manipulation I had suffered for too long. I experienced a feeling of tranquility as the ceremonies got underway. It was my turn to make my argument. The reality was causing Ryan's facade to crumble, and I could see him writhing in his seat. Both sides were given thorough consideration by the judge, and I could feel the atmosphere change as my proof outweighed their falsehoods. The judge finally handed out the decision. "Considering the facts of your marriage and the evidence that has been given, I give the divorce. Lisa, you have the right to keep the house and any money you've earned together." I felt the weight of 1,000 shackles break and a wave of relief sweep over me. I had completed the task. I had freedom. I inhaled deeply as I walked out of the courthouse. All set to welcome the future. I was aware that there would still be difficulties, but I felt hope for the first time in a long time. I had regained my dignity, my independence, and most importantly, my sense of value. My identity would no longer be defined by the manipulation and treachery of my past. I was prepared to let go and welcome a life full of opportunities. The knowledge I had gained would follow me into a new phase of my life, one in which I would be in charge of my own fate.